comment from our constituents. And I think we're nonetheless need to proceed in making this decision. And I think I'm prepared to do that. The reason is because what this comes down to me is what are the values of this community that I think can instruct a response to this. And one of the really simple ones that I was raised on in this community is simply that if you find out you're doing something intentionally or not that's harming someone, and it's easy to stop, you just stop. And I think that's a pretty simple approach to this. I think the name of Mount Evans is inflicting harm today, and it's easy for us to stop. And so I support that change. I realize that's maybe a little bit of a simplistic approach, but that's my take on this as how, if we had the time to talk to everyone in the community and bring them up to speed and hear their response, I think that's where we land. I think we land on not wanting to cause harm that's avoidable as a community. So I'll just start there by just saying that I support a name change, and maybe rather than jump into which names, just leave space for the others to respond to that or share their thoughts on that.
Well, I'll weigh in. And before I do, though, I probably didn't start this meeting how I should have. I just wanted to recognize all the guests that we have joining us today. There's 53 people who've taken time out of their day to listen to what we have to say. And I don't know how many on Facebook. I found this extremely difficult, and I continue to find it extremely difficult. I think part of it is because even though this isn't the first time we've done this, we did this quite recently with Mount Squaw. Mount Squaw was very different. Mount Squaw we were discussing a term that was offensive to multiple people groups, and it's not my job to tell somebody what they find offensive and what they don't find offensive. Kind of like maybe what George is alluding to. If somebody says that they feel harmed, and I'm happy to take them at their word. The other thing that was different about Mount Squaw is there was only one submission. So there was there was consensus about what it should be changed to. And I think the three of us kind of got on the same page pretty fast when it came to that. What we're talking about today is essentially changing a historical name based on accusations against a specific man. And there was a lot of great information that was provided in our packet, but there really wasn't anything. There was not consensus. There is a wide range of opinion. And history is an interesting thing too. One of the things that I really found valuable in the packet was the link to Ken Burns. Ken Burns, if you haven't heard of him, is a phenomenal filmmaker. He did an awesome movie recently on Muhammad Ali for PBS. But in the beginning of his notes about the movie, he did about Sand Creek. He says, "We both remember the Sand Creek massacre, honor those who were lost, and explore how the events were recast and rewritten over time. History is a complicated, malleable thing, and how we remember our history is part of our history." And what was missing in the packet was the two academic studies that I was able to find. One of them from Denver University, another one from Northwestern University, universities that Territorial Governor Evans provided key donations of land in order to make possible. One of them essentially mentions that he created the conditions in which the massacre was highly likely. The other one says no known evidence that Evans helped plan the Sand Creek massacre, had any knowledge of it in advance. The extent evidence suggests he did not consider the Indians at Sand Creek to be a threat, and that he would have opposed the attack that took place. So when I look at what we're being asked to do, the first part of it is essentially to take sides on history and exactly what happened and what didn't happen. And I don't know that we're doing anything other than kind of standing up almost a impromptu ad hoc kangaroo court if we're going to take on that matter. And it's a matter that I don't think anyone has taken on and produced results that can't be challenged. and over 150 years has passed since those events took place. I certainly don't question that the events took place or that they were horrific and that the U.S. Army had a direct responsibility. But beyond that, I don't really feel qualified to say much more than that. And again, I'm honored that all the people have come here together. I think that this is a fantastic conversation. I feel honored that somebody asked me for what my opinion was. But on the other hand, somebody recently commented, essentially, we're three white guys here talking to you, and I don't understand. I don't feel like I have a legitimate voice or a vote in this process. So somebody asked us to consider the notion of standing aside and allowing the process to go forward without my vote, and that's what I'm going to choose to do. You're on mute, Randy.
Yeah, thanks. Common problem there. Forget to do that. So just for clarity, George's question was, do we support name change? And I think your answer is that you don't support weighing in on that decision on whether there is a name change at all. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
That's right.
Okay, fair enough. From the beginning of this, really going back to when it first came in front of Sean and I regarding, I think, Squaw Mountain the first time and Mount Mistahay, excuse me, S-word mountain back in 2017. I've been really sensitive to that idea too, that part of the problem is that there's always, from a Native American standpoint, it seems like there's always some white person trying to kill you or take your stuff, or some white person trying to save you. And I didn't feel it was appropriate for us to fall into any of those categories. And that what occurred to me is that the fairest way for this to happen is for the predominantly white culture in this society that gets to hold the microphone and make those final decisions to actually lay the microphone down and let somebody else pick up the microphone and make those decisions. And I felt that critically, especially throughout the last year and a half while we've been dealing with S-word mountain and now Mount Evans. I still feel it today. And it's painful for me to think that yet again, if we look across our county commission, we see that that's who we are. We bought the yard signs, we got here. And now this has come in front of us. And in speaking to one of our former state commissioners of Indian Affairs, and I hope he doesn't mind, I'll go ahead and quote him on it. I said, I'm really troubled by all of this because once again, it comes down to some people in Washington who would like the recommendation of some people in Colorado at the state level and their chairman and their governor so they can make their decision. And those people have asked us for our decision because they want it. And, so I expressed the great pain that I had being stuck in that position because I felt like if things were named the way they could have been and should have been in history, and if we lived differently as humans, there might have been different outcomes and different names on these things, and maybe Sand Creek wouldn't have happened, but it did. And he said to me, with regard to whether or not I should pick something or not, or even involve myself in the conversation, that you bought those yard signs. And so somebody calls upon you to lead because you've been asked for that opinion, and that opinion now matters. And so my thought ever since then has been, how can I let it be most representative of the people that I wish were holding this microphone today, because I feel it's more their territory and decision to make on something like this. With regard to the idea that we should not get between the tribes, it becomes even more painful. And I share that very greatly. But I also pointed out what I just saw here, and I pointed out the emails that I received this morning, and I can promise you that there's nothing in my communications with those tribes that tried to push them one direction or the other. The two Ute tribes that have responded, the Northern Arapaho and the other Ute tribe in the northern Ute who call themselves the Ute Indian tribe specifically, and up in Fort Duchesne, Utah. They haven't weighed in yet. I mean, I've heard verbal verifications of things, but it's not something that they said that their leaders, their tribal leaders, have been prepared to put in writing yet, but they're working on it. I also know that it's that standing aside and not doing anything about it that's kept us where we are as long as we are. And for almost a third of that over 150 years, I've lived in Clear Creek County. And the first place I ever winter camped, the first place I snowshoed, the first place I cross country skied, and the place I've raced my bike up for all those years, and some place that I was proud to call part of my new home for a third of that time, for half a century. There was never one moment. When people say we erase history, there was never one moment in which my knowledge of the name of that mountain is Mount Evans led me or caused me to understand what happened. And what happened was in July of 1864, Governor Evans did make a proclamation that remained on the books until that became an executive order, a de facto executive order in 1876, when all previous proclamations were rolled forward. And more than one governor was asked to change that, remove it from the books, until as recently as a little over a year ago, when some Native American folks asked if I could help with that. I learned that recently what we were hearing was, well, everyone knows that that would never stand up in court. If a white person killed a hostile Indian, and a hostile Indian was defined as any Indian that wasn't where they were told to be when they were told to be there. And then I learned from some of our friends that are out of state that they didn't want to come to Colorado as a matter of principle until that law was off the books. And so we got it taken off the books this last year. And then I hear them say that they look to the west and they see Mount Evans, and every day they look up there, it does hurt them. And I'm not them, so it's not mine to say. Except that I've seen that mountain all those years without knowing it, and it never taught me one thing, knowing that name. So I don't think changing the name erases history or changes history or leaves us unable to understand it, because there's nothing about the name that's taught us that so far. It certainly hasn't taught me that so far, and almost everyone else I've talked to, many people who are very much in favor of name change now, said they had no idea. They'd heard of Sand Creek. They learned there was stuff both directions. Now they start looking up the statistics of, how many people were killed and how many massacres and where, and it's changed their outlook. It's not just the Cheyenne and Arapaho that it pertains to, and it's not just the Ute either. That proclamation in July of 64 led to the November 29th, clearly led to the November 29th Sand Creek Massacre. Governor Evans said that absolutely any white person could kill any Indian that was considered hostile based on whether they just felt threatened by them or not in any way, which meant that they were subservient and could be shot by not being so if they were hostile to whatever they were told to do. And lots were. And it wasn't just forced migration like the Trail of Tears. Many Cheyenne, Arapaho, and others fled the state at that time because they recognized their lives were in great, great danger, especially after Sand Creek. And that's why they lived predominantly in Wyoming, Montana, and Oklahoma today, those who choose to live on their now reservation lands there. So remove that pain and to force the conversation. If we take no position, or if we say, let's leave it to the Native Americans, and if the state then chose, because they heard that from us, to do the same, and the feds decided to do the same, then we're right back where we were and nothing changed. And I think that's perceived as a victory for somebody else. The fact that the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho, so let me just say this to answer the first simple question without going further, because there's maybe a little more conversation to get to the place where we go on what our recommendation is. I absolutely support name change. I support it to honor my own family, to honor other families, to honor other people that made these proposals, um, and to help further educate myself and our community, and maybe a broader community than even here in Clear Creek.
And go ahead, Sean. If you have
No,
something
go
to
ahead, Ryan. George. Yeah, like I mentioned, I respect both of you, men. I respect your abilities to figure this out and trust you to figure it out without my involvement.
So just so we have direction on where to go next, the board is considering a resolution concerning the renaming. Your choice is to either simply fill in the blank with what you see before you, which is very minimal, or as George was mentioning, he suspected that Commissioner Wheelock would want to put more information in the resolution. So what you could do today is you could move to approve of renaming to whatever it is you would like, and then direct staff to work on a proposed draft that would be brought back to the board for actual approval, an actual resolution at that time. We could do that on April 5th.
Thank you for the process clarification there. And Sean, I just want to say I respect your opinion in this and your decision. And it's one of the options that was in my mind too, coming into this. With respect to the characterization of kind of this conversation as a kangaroo court, I mean, to some extent, you're right that we're talking about something that was 150 years ago, and we've got some original source documents that are very persuasive to me. The thing that really, I think, just clears the whole thing up is the fact that something happened that was not a kangaroo court, and it happened in the time, right? Which is that he was held to account for his actions and was forced to resign due to his role in the abuse of Indigenous peoples in Colorado. And to me, that just kind of makes it pretty clear and simple.
Yeah, just to be clear, my use of the term kangaroo court wasn't disparaging anything other than the fact that we've been asked by two important bodies to weigh in on something, and we were given no guidance whatsoever on how to do it. And we did our best, but I think what we did fell far short of what anyone would call due process. Yeah,
definitely. And fortunately, we're not talking about, trying to impose penalties or any kind of, make a conviction here. I think that judgment was already made. As far as the appropriateness of asking us, I view that not really as asking us as three people. This is about asking a local community. That's the established policy of the federal government as it relates to name changes. And I do think that's appropriate. I think the fact that we're vastly a majority white community now today should not prevent us from having a voice in this process. I think that's because we have a sense of this place, right? We have a close relationship with that mountain and this place. And so the question is, like, what is the name on that mountain of Mount Evans contributed to that for me? And up until this connection to Governor Evans' legacy was made, I would say that it had no contribution, positive or negative, to my experience of that mountain. I think after learning what we've learned, it does. And it's a negative one. It takes away from my experience of that mountain. And just so that everybody knows, this is something that I've always lived on the north side of the Valley of Idaho Springs and look up at that mountain every day. And Sean, I think you can see it from your window too. It's one of the things that really unifies us with our unique geography is that we all get a good view of that mountain around Clear Creek County. And so I don't think that this community, I don't think that mountain deserves this negative connotation associated with this name. And so that's, and I'm not trying to belabor the point or argue. I just want to make my logic really clear to everyone who's listening to understand where I'm coming from. So taking the next step is, if we support a name change, where do you land? Which name? I think I prefer Mount Blue Sky. I think the thing that I heard that was very persuasive to me was Blue Sky is a name that can contribute to the healing and be a unifying name for all of the stakeholders. When I think about just like what we could name that mountain that really just reflects its beauty and its meaning in my life, well, I stare up at it, and in this beautiful Colorado sky that's almost always blue. I don't know how many days of the year we get blue skies in Colorado, but we like to claim more than everywhere else. I think that's very meaningful. I think it's beautiful, and the fact that it is meaningful to the indigenous groups, the fact that it's meaningful to what I think is our identity as the state of Colorado, and our daily experience of that mountain as people who live in its shadow. I just think that it's a wonderful proposal, and so that's the one that I would like to see us support. If Randy agrees, Sean, knowing that you're kind of standing aside from this one.
Sean, did you have any more? I really don't want to mute. I know you've muted yourself, but I mean in the conversation, but I don't want to. I share my respect for your opinion as well, and regardless of whether I agree with it, and I just want to make sure you don't feel like you put a gag in your own mouth for the rest of the conversation.
No, I'm all good.
Okay. I have had similar. We've had a lot of conversations about Blue Sky versus Cheyenne or Arapaho, and I've heard different. And I clearly I've made it clear right now that I believe it should be one of those two. We've heard different people tell us different things about whether one of them could be offensive to certain people, whether the idea of blue sky, because there is a blue sky ceremony that has been purported by some of the Cheyenne to be a name which should not be spoken because it's sacred enough. I've heard other Cheyenne tell me the opposite, who hold a different opinion. In any case, it's the English words for blue sky. And we talked about the component of education. I know for a fact that the people that put that forward told me they put it forward because that renaming for them, Fred Mosqueda with the Southern Arapaho and Chester Whiteman with the Southern Cheyenne. And I think it was Chester, as I heard later on, because I asked the question, where did the name come from? Who actually proposed the name? And I heard it was Chester. If it was somebody else, then so be it. But what they said was that the reason that they chose an English name in this case rather than an indigenous name was because they wanted it to be as educational as possible to the broadest population. They already knew the pain of their own existence that came from the loss of their lands and their people and their culture and all the things they could have had here and could have been part of. And so today, to try to unify people was really important and at the top of their mind, and to educate. The idea that it even helped their tribes come together to have this conversation, even if they don't fully agree in the end, was incredibly important. And it is reflective of some of what I heard, which was our white people's legend of the area. We love to put that on our advertisements for our businesses here, if they're tourism related or in our historical society stuff. Back when time began, the Big Bang happened in 1859 when Jackson discovered gold apparently, and that's when time began. But some of our history that we've celebrated is that the hot springs up on Soda Creek was a place where the Arapaho and the Ute did both socialize and trade and barter. I couldn't find any really solid demographic or any kind of information that would try to prove that in history, because so much indigenous history is oral rather than written. So I looked at some maps and was immediately some old maps, really, really old maps, and to see where the dividing lines between those territories were. And as an ex-surveyor, I actually plotted from these maps. One of them was very much not to scale, but you could see the ranges and drainages and figure out where they were. And in one case, the dividing line literally hit the east end of Idaho Springs. And in the other one that was from the 1851 map, from the 1861 map, it plotted out to be about where the Central City Parkway would be, about 2 miles east of Idaho Springs. So it supported the notion that at least those tribes mingled together in that area. And it was pretty common knowledge that the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, although they didn't always get along, also did get along at times and trucked together. And so it supported that notion of cultures coming together. And so all these years later, when, you know, progress has been made or damage has been done, depending on how you choose to perceive it, there's an opportunity for these tribes to talk with each other and come together over this is, I think, important and kind of symbolic. And the idea that the ones that put forth, that both tribes actually that put forth proposals, put forth English language names for those, for either the names of the tribes or for the blue sky, because they wanted it to be accessible and educate a broader public than themselves, was also important. So when I thought about this being a place and a process and a name that could unite people again in the manner that it did it before 150 years ago, before 156 years ago, before George Jackson stumbled down the valley in January and found some gold on Clear Creek, that for people to come together over this conversation again, even in some disagreement at this time, was hugely powerful, and for it to unite a broader population of people of all shapes, colors, sizes, by educating them was also incredibly important. And it could be either one, but the obvious support that I've heard, especially today, hearing from 2 of the 3 Ute tribes that they support Mount Blue Sky, was, I think, finally persuasive to me just this morning that it's fair enough to move forward and choose one. With it go my apologies to Otto Braided here from the Northern Cheyenne, because I hate to be a white guy making a decision for other people again. But I would support Mount Blue Sky, and I do support a more informative resolution, because I think it's important that we memorialize why we did this, not so much to defend ourselves, but to try to educate. And I think that if we choose the Mount Blue Sky resolution, we can instruct staff to work on that. And I'm happy to also work with Peter a little bit if need be. I do think that one clause or one sentence or 2 in there needs to be, I tried not to be too hyperbolic in it, but just be pretty factual, but it should reflect somehow that acknowledgement of this being, having been more strongly the ancestral home of the Ute tribes as well as other tribes in Colorado. I think we've gone as far as we could have contacted. There are, I think, 48 tribes that call Colorado home. There are, I got a text a little bit ago. I misspoke, and I was correctly quoted, but misspoke in the paper recently when I was quoted as having said that there were 534 tribes in the United States, and that on every one of these naming proposals, the Bureau of Geographic Names sends a communication to every one of those 574 tribes to see if they have any objection. And they consider no response to be no objection. So they really take care of it at that level on their end. But I felt, because this was so important to Colorado and the nation and Clear Creek County, that we at least had to talk to those people that historically we knew had the either strongest claims historically because of the name of the mountain or had been here. And that was mostly, and not to discount the Pawnee and the Lakota and any number of other people who I know also support these name changes without offering alternates, some of them anyway, that I think it's important that we reached out to the ones we did. we know that all 574 tribes will still be consulted on this once it's official at the BGN, and I think that's already gone out to most of them as these proposals have come in. I support Mount Blue Sky. I'm happy to make a motion at this time that that we support Mount Blue Sky, and I'd like to put it in the form of a motion, and that we choose the verbiage of the Mount Blue Sky resolution with whatever our staff, our county attorney particularly chooses as the best wording to correct any of it that is maybe not appropriate resolution material. Yeah, it's a motion.
I think if we're going to go with a resolution that lays out the why in the way that you proposed, I think I'd like to add to it. I think I'd like time to have some voice into it. I could second a motion for the more generic proposal, or I could second a motion to support a name change to Mount Blue Sky with a resolution brought back at a later date. I don't think I'm prepared to support this resolution right now.
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that we support Mount Blue Sky with staff instruction to bring back a resolution for a future potential action item. And
Okay.
so that's a friendly amendment request. I amend my motion to that effect.
Okay. Then in that case, I second that motion to support a change of the name of Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky, and ask staff to bring us a resolution that we can vote on in our next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just want to express my gratitude again to everybody for weighing in on this and doing a bunch of research and educating us. It's been a very enriching process. I hope not just for the three on this board.
Thanks, George. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
We will bring back a, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna say the motion carries 2-0.
And we will bring back a resolution for consideration by the board for the April 5th meeting. That works.
Okay.
Randy looks like he's frozen.
Oh, no, he's back. I just wanted to second what George had to say. I really appreciate all the time and energy that everyone put into this, and your grace as well. I mean, this was kind of our first time, maybe one of the first counties in Colorado to have to entertain this process. And we did the best that we could. And I'll leave you, Randy, with the last word.
None. Enough said.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. We will move on to our next agenda item. Not totally unrelated. It is, we're a little bit late, but this is our last agenda item of the day, so that's no problem. It's a consideration of a response to the federal government on their request for suggestions to rename Squaw Pass. And I think this is another, I think, Randy, you may have brought this to our attention, so maybe you can give us some framing and help us launch this conversation.
Sure, there are, and there's a little more to follow this, but for today's consideration, the reason this was brought up is that we have, well, first of all, Highway 103 as it's known, rather than Squaw Pass Road officially, according to Matt Taylor, our GIS guy, in our mapping group. We have a road naming committee that works on stuff like this. In this particular case, though Squaw Pass itself is a geographic point, and I looked at it to confirm to see exactly where it was and where it fell on clear map regarding property lines, and it's definitely within the national forest. It's not on private property. And so therefore it also falls under and it's part of that new, one of Secretary Halen's new orders, one of which is to replace every federally owned, federally manned, or federally, every place in America that's named with the word squaw, the S word, is to be renamed if it's a federal asset and under federal authority. So Squaw Pass, as a geographic point within that, within federal territory or federal land, is one of those places. And so they're taking it on. They have published a list of places throughout Colorado and throughout the nation that have that distinction. And they have published alongside that a list of 4 or 5 nearby geographic points from which we could draw a name. One of those that was listed, and I don't recall the rest of them for Squaw Pass, was what is now Mistahay, Mount Mistahay, and there were several others. And so the question is, do we want to take a position? Do we want to allow, or do we want to allow that committee to take its own position based on input it gets from the public? Do we want to play a role in this or not with regard to that name? It will be renamed. There isn't a question about that. It's being renamed by virtue of Secretary Halen's order and their commission working on this stuff. And as with Squaw and Evans, we're being asked if we wish to weigh in or not. I will let you know that someone else said, call it Mount Blue Sky. And I said, well, it's not a foregone conclusion that Mount Blue Sky, that Mount Evans will become Mount Blue Sky, because the final decision will be made whenever the BGN, the U.S. Bureau of Geographic Names, takes it up. So those are the kinds of the options that are out there in front of us. With regard to the county roads, that's something that the county decides, and I think it happens with our county, through our county map, the recommendations of our county mapping team or county road name team. And we know, because we've already had some folks that live along the roads voice different opinions about those, and that's a completely different process and subject matter that we'll need to take up. But so the question is, what do we want to do to weigh in on what's known as right now as Squaw Pass? Because the feds want to know what we think on that too.
Thank you for the background. And I do see the risk associated with suggesting that they change it to Blue Sky Pass. Although I don't know that, as I'm just kind of thinking through this in real time, regardless of the outcome of the discussion of Mount Evans, Blue Sky Pass might just be a really good name.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, yeah, exactly.
And so
the suggestion was to just call it Owl Woman, which is the English for. But anyway, go ahead, George. I'm sorry, I'm cutting in on you.
No, that's and so I don't know. Like, as I'm just thinking through this, maybe that's a good place to land. I mean, it's a name I really love, and it's because yeah, I don't have to explain again. People can reference our last session for why. And so, Randy, I'll just let you say what you were going to say.
No, that was it. It just struck me. I just, that was my stream of consciousness button in on you. I just kind of thought, oh yeah, and somebody said Owl Woman, just thinking of stuff that people have thrown at me. And I haven't, honestly, everything else we're doing has taken so much attention that I just haven't thought my way through this one really carefully yet, other than I was almost concerned that it might be, I think there's a deadline on it that's coming up soon is the catch, and Jenny Runyon could inform us on that probably. I saw her commenting earlier. She is with the U.S. Bureau of Geographic Names. Yeah, April the 24th is the deadline for public comment on S-word pass. And the question is, do we want to give this some thought maybe and take it up in April at an April meeting and see if we want to make a recommendation after having maybe today stating that we'd love to hear from our public and hear from everyone else, including tribes again, on what they think could be a good solution there. I'm kind of prepared to not act on it today, knowing that we have until the 24th to tender a letter of recommendation.
Can we confirm, is the state, do we have a deadline by the state of April 4?
It's the feds, I believe, and Jenny Runyon just put that in. State deadline is April 4th, I see, before they discuss on April 10th. But I think, I'm guessing that means, well, that's what Jessine said. I'm guessing that Jenny means that the county would still be able to comment to the BGN until April the 24th. Can we confirm that?
I'll just say two things. Number one, it's common or even normal for the pass to have a name completely different from the surrounding mountains. That's normally how it works here, at least in Colorado. And the second thing I would offer is the process that we did. Part of it that I like for sure was getting input from a wide variety of stakeholders, and it seems like we would be wise to do the same thing here. As smart as the three of us are in terms of coming up with a name, someone might be smarter than us.
Yeah, our next meeting is April the 5th, which is the day after the state deadline.
Yeah, Sean, I completely agree. I'm not sure we have the time, and the alternative is that they come up with one of those 4 names that were just kind of randomly chosen. I don't really love any of them. But I have seen some suggestions even in the chat that seem good. Wagon Trail Pass is definitely a nod to the history of its use.
Real quick, George, sorry to interrupt you. The 4th is almost exactly 3 weeks from today, and we don't have a busy agenda from now until then. So I would be open to having a special meeting just to kind of allow the public to weigh into Beth Luther like they did for this last process and allow us to take some action if we need to.
Yeah, we could actually set a meeting, a special meeting for the morning of the 4th and be out by close of business on the 4th with a letter. And that gives us the absolute maximum amount of time for the public, any of the Indian tribes, anybody else to weigh in on this idea, or local historians. I note that Ann Hayden threw a shout out there, a shout out for Wagon Road Pass, which has an actual historical connotation apparently to the road. And there are others, Owl Woman Pass, Blue Sky Pass. They all are real interesting ideas. I'm up for giving it till the morning. I mean, can we check our schedules for the morning of the 4th and see if we can just set a meeting and a thing?
I can make the morning of the 4th work.
Yeah, I'm good.
I think, yeah, that gives some more time for some more feedback and for us to gather our own thoughts.
Do we want to pick a time?
If it's possible to do it at 1 o'clock, that would be perfect for me. And that would still give us plenty of time to send along a response.
Yeah, I have, 1 o'clock works for me. I have an 11:30 to 1 already scheduled that day, but I could do 1 o'clock. And all it's going to be is it can just be as simple as staff direction to get a letter out before close of business that day that states our preference.
Okay. Idaho Springs has a recovery task force starting at 2 that I typically attend, but yeah, we can just do this. I think as we all state frequently, our jobs as a public board come before everything else.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to throw out that's a last, you recall that I spoke, as I was speaking earlier, I talked about that educational component. Each of the 2 Ute tribe support communications we got today in favor of Mount Blue Sky said each of them carried with the qualification that that embedded within that was the desire for communication that acknowledged this as Ute lands. Toward that end, I've already had some conversation a little bit with staff over the last few months, not just about the fact that this was Ute lands, but with both a couple of staff people as well as with some local historical folks who've been involved in like historic preservation around here for some time. That if we could, and I'll give you an example. In the clinic, there was a decision made to use an historical, the historical aspect of the community to do a lot of the furnishings on the walls and so forth. So mostly what we have is some really cool historical photographs that depict people from the gold rush forward, miners with shotguns standing outside cabins and things like that. And I think it would be very wise of us to broaden that perspective in terms of time and culture to be able to show more of what really happened here. And so I just want to say that I'm making a commitment to try to start working a little bit with some people. I communicated with a Southern Ute this morning that no matter what came out of today's meeting, I think that that's worthy, and I would like to be in communication with them to have them help us with that, with knowledge that they have, historical artifact knowledge and so forth. Same for the other tribes, Cheyenne and Arapaho, and that hopefully some of the work that we do here historically just begins to get a little broader context that's educational for the kids around here and for the people that visit us. Toward that end, I think we can keep our renaming page up for now and maybe add something to it about S-word pass. And then we might actually leave it as an artifact on our website and an educational artifact for some time to explain to people about the name change through the rest of the process as the name changes, assuming that it does, and maybe a little beyond to help with that, have a place that we can play in that education. And just some ideas I'm throwing out there, not an ask for a motion or anything to do anything in particular. I'm just letting you know the context.
Jenny Runyon just weighed in mentioning there's 5 candidates submitted to the task force. And I don't know, Jenny, if you're willing to, maybe you can just reply in chat, but I'm wondering, is there a way for us to add any additional potential names such as Wagon Trail or any of the other ones in time for this process, or are we kind of headed down a dead end there?
The last sentence of it says any other name would need to be proposed via public comment process or submitted to the CGNAB to send along. So our plan to meet on the 4th and submit a thought seems to be in keeping with that.
I just want to be sure before we let the public know what we're asking of them, what it means. That's all. And here's Jenny. She can just tell us.
Yes, thank you. I type so slow, it'd take me an hour to give you a decent answer. No, just kidding. So yes, Sean, thank you. Yes, the second half of my note there was that certainly there's really a couple options. One is to submit them through the public comment period directly to the task force. That's the public comment period that will end on April 24th. Or given that the Colorado Names Board has set up a process to consider input from communities, tribes, so forth, you can go that route instead. They have a link on their webpage now where you can submit other names. So yes, any other name that's put forward by the community, by any other tribe, would be considered by the task force along with those 5 names they've already come up with. And again, those 5 names are based simply on the proximity to SQ Pass. They simply did a sort of an algorithm and looked at the nearest 5 features. Obviously, Mestahay is one of them, but it's not the closest. The other 4 are actually closer. So the task force has been instructed if there's no other option, they're supposed to work down that list. So select number 1, unless it's not appropriate. Then they go to number 2 and number 3, down the list. So yes, if you all feel that Mestahay is the best choice, I would definitely recommend you share that with either the California board or directly with the task force.
All right.
And I can share the links with Randy. I can send you the Federal Register notice with the links for comment. Or any other person on this call or any other community member who feels another name is preferable is welcome to propose that also through the same process. And the final comment is that next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Department of the Interior is holding 3 tribal listening sessions where tribes will have the option of joining the call and offering any names they may choose. So yes, conceivably you could end up with, a dozen names in the mix. It's quite possible. So right now those 5 are definitely on the table. Any others would need to be proposed.
So basically, if we're going to seek public input, it sounds like, and if we come up with 1 or 2 or 3 more to add to that list, we could do that, or we could basically just come up with one that's not on the list and say, this is what we think our community prefers.
Exactly. Or you could even say one of those 5 is what the community prefers. Yeah, at this point, all comments are being taken in and being considered, and quite how the task force is going to pick the final choice is, I confess, I don't quite know how they're going to do that, but if the name's not on the table, not on the list, it won't be considered.
Yeah, I got you.
I begin to understand why we were told that when it came to a non-derogatory but offensive name like Mount Evans, they said it could be 4 to 5 years till they get there, because there's a lot to wade through. So
Yeah.
what we did with regard to Ms. DeHay previously was, once we came to the conclusion and made our decision, and we've made a decision here now, we sent it to the CGNAB, and we sent it to the governor, and we sent it to the BGN. We sent it to all 3, just knowing that each of them would consider that input, and that's the order in which it goes to the CGNAB. Then the governor ratifies or doesn't ratify, whatever, either says he does or doesn't agree with the recommendation of the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board. And then from there it goes to the BGN, and then the BGN is free to act either according to those recommendations or of their own volition, depending on what they decide. And so if we were to hold that meeting on the 4th and then send the results of our decision at that meeting on the 4th to those 3 sources, we'd have all our bases covered. Is that what you would say?
Right.
Okay.
So I know this is an action session, so the board can take some action today. Just so the board's aware, I am not going to be present on the 4th. I previously advised the board of this. I do not know whether my presence will be needed for this meeting, but if it is going to be, I would respectfully ask that it be moved to a different date.
I think what we're talking about sounds pretty straightforward. So as valuable as you are, I think we might be able to do this without you.
That's great. No worries there.
Pick a name and send a letter, pretty much. I can send an email almost. Pick a name and send it out officially.
Yeah, maybe that involves a commitment from us to try to not burden staff with like the construction of a letter, and to keep the comment pretty concise and simple.
Right. We can keep I mean, I'm happy to work with Peter in advance, or any of you can too, and just construct a very simple letter with a blank. And all we have to do is fill in the blank and send it out that afternoon.
Okay.
Perfect. Anything else for the good of the order? I do have one other thing real quick. Anything from you, George, Randy, or staff? Sheriff, I just wanted to say hello, and you've been kind of lurking in our meetings for the last few times, and wondering if you have any updates for us or anything to add to the conversation.
No, I don't have anything to add. I would like to know about the insurance stuff. I looked for the presentation that she was giving you guys, and I didn't get a copy of it. I'd like to, like she said, though, she's going to contact me and we'll sit down and talk about it, because I'd really like to discuss that with her.
Okay.
We'll get that to him. We'll get that to you, Sheriff. That was a error on our part. That should have been in the packet, and it was not. So we'll
That's
get it
all
to
right. I think I overheard her a couple times saying that she was going to get with me and my command staff, and we can go over that report. I'd really like to do that and know what's going on with it, because I didn't catch all of it, but I wanted to talk to her about it and see where we're at. But other than that, thank you, Sean.
All right. Thanks, Sheriff.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, just kind of what Sean said. But thank you, Sheriff. You are always here listening. I would be too. And I just want to make sure, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure the rest of the board, you're welcome to jump in and comment on anything that is of interest to you or that we need to hear about.
All right, I appreciate that. Yeah, I just like to be listening and keep up on stuff. So that's why I'm here, not to interfere in your meetings or anything, just kind of keep up on stuff that's going on. So thank you.
Perfect. Okay, well, and again, special thanks to all the guests who joined us and helped enrich our conversation over this process. And thanks to staff. It was a kind of a long day, but we're adjourned.
No more exec, right? We're done.
We're done.